When you think of the world's most powerful militaries, what comes to mind? You're probably picturing the colossal defense budgets of the United States or China, hundreds of billions of dollars poured into stealth fighters, aircraft carriers, and advanced weapons systems. That's the conventional way we measure military might, money a government allocates to its armed forces. But that understanding is missing a huge piece of the puzzle. It misses a darker, more complex reality. What if I told you that some of the wealthiest military forces on Earth don't really rely on government funding? Forget official budgets. We're about to expose the armies that have built their own massive business empires, controlling everything from banks to construction companies and generating billions in revenue completely off the books. These aren't just armies, they're corporate conglomerates with guns. They build roads, sell bottled water, operate mobile phone networks, and run luxury hotels. Their wealth isn't itemized in any national budget. It's hidden away in corporate balance sheets, opaque trust funds, and sprawling industrial complexes. This gives them a level of power and autonomy that is almost unprecedented. They aren't just a state's military arm. In many ways, they're a state within a state, with their own economic lifeblood, their own interests, and the firepower to protect them. These are the world's richest militaries, and their true power has nothing to do with their official budget. Today, we're opening the books. The why, the logic of the military, CEO. The idea of a soldier running a pasta factory or a general overseeing a real estate empire seems a little bizarre, right? Why would an institution designed for national defense get into commercial business in the first place? The answer is a messy mix of history, strategic calculation, and raw opportunism. In most countries, this didn't happen overnight. It was a slow creep, driven by a few key motivations that turned generals into CEOs. One of the biggest drivers is the search for financial independence. A military that makes its own money isn't entirely beholden to civilian politicians or the limits of a national budget. That kind of autonomy is a powerful tool. It allows the armed forces to fund their own secret projects, buy equipment off the books, and give lavish perks to their officer corps, ensuring loyalty. Things like exclusive clubs, private hospitals, and top-tier schools become possible without anyone in parliament having to sign off on it. This creates a privileged class, a military elite whose own prosperity is tied directly to the success of their businesses. But it goes deeper than institutional perks. This system allows high-ranking generals to accumulate vast personal wealth, fortunes that far exceed their official salaries, often hidden in offshore accounts or funneled into private family enterprises. They're not just generals, they're tycoons in uniform. In some cases, the dive into business started as a practical necessity. After the devastating Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, was tasked with rebuilding the country. This gave them a foothold in construction and engineering that they never let go of. Khatam al-Anbiya, the IRGC's engineering arm, became the go-to contractor for massive government projects. What began as post-war reconstruction quietly grew into an economic empire. For other nations, the shift was actually a response to peace. In Egypt, after the 1979 peace treaty with Israel, the defense budget was scaled back. The military, a massive institution, suddenly had less to do and fewer resources. So, to keep this powerful group busy and self-sustaining, President Anwar Sadat created the National Service Projects Organization, or NSPO, in 1979. Its official goal was to make the armed forces self-sufficient, but it quickly expanded to sell surplus goods on the civilian market. That peace dividend didn't go back to the state. It was reinvested into building a parallel economy. And then there's the issue of sanctions. For a regime like Iran's, international sanctions are designed to cripple the economy. But for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, sanctions became a golden business opportunity. As legitimate international companies pulled out, the IRGC's network of front companies stepped right in. They developed sophisticated smuggling networks and black market channels, completely bypassing international restrictions. Their control over ports and borders turned sanctions from a punishment into a source of immense profit and power. This logic creates a dangerous feedback loop. The more economic power a military gets, the more political influence it wields. It becomes a major employer, a key industrial player, and a source of patronage. This has corrosive effects within the military itself. The focus on profit can warp its core mission, as promotions may become dependent on business success rather than military merit. This economic weight allows it to shape national policy, resist civilian oversight, and make sure its commercial interests are protected. In this system, the line between national security and corporate profit becomes hopelessly blurred. The military is no longer just defending the nation, it's defending its market share. The examples of these military corporate empires are just the beginning. We're going to examine 5 nations where the military has become a dominant economic force: Myanmar, Thailand, Pakistan, Egypt, and Iran. To understand the scale of their official power before we dive into their hidden wealth, we'll look at them in order of their government-allocated military budgets, from smallest to largest. But as you'll see, the official numbers are just a fraction of the real story. As case study 1, Myanmar, the junta's lifeline. At the end of our list, by official budget, is Myanmar, where the military, known as the Tatmadaw, has long operated a sprawling business empire that makes it almost completely independent of civilian control. With a stated budget of around $2.4 billion in recent years, its real financial power comes from 2 massive, secretive conglomerates: Myanmar Economic Holdings Public Company Limited, MEHL, and Myanmar Economic Corporation, MEC. These 2 entities give the Tatmadaw control over huge chunks of the country's economy, including trading, natural resources, alcohol, cigarettes, and consumer goods. Unlike the other examples, this business empire isn't just about privilege. It's the financial lifeline of the ruling junta. Revenues from MEHL and MEC are kept entirely off-book, allowing the military to finance its operations with zero civilian oversight. This economic autonomy has directly fueled decades of human rights abuses. Following the 2021 military coup that violently overthrew the elected government, these conglomerates became a primary target of international sanctions. The United States and other nations recognized that MEHL and MEC were not ordinary companies, but the economic engine of the regime's oppression. While the civil war and sanctions have put pressure on these businesses, the Tatmadaw's deep-rooted control over key economic sectors has allowed it to continue its fight against pro-democracy and ethnic resistance forces, proving that its true strength comes from its corporate cash flow, not its formal budget. Case study 2, Thailand, the kingdom's conglomerate. While its official budget is smaller, the Thai military operates one of the most diverse and least transparent business portfolios in the world. Its commercial activities range from toothpick to warship, according to one Thai politician. The military owns and operates television and radio stations, runs hotels and golf courses, manages airports, and has deep interests in banking and energy. Much like in Pakistan, the enterprise began under the guise of welfare. The War Veterans Organization of Thailand, WVO, established in 1948, runs special enterprises with the stated goal of generating income to supplement its government budget. These enterprises include a printing mill and an office for agriculture, industry, and general services, which bids on public works projects like road construction and dredging canals. Beyond the WVO, each branch of the armed forces runs its own businesses. The Army operates TV Channel 5 and a vast network of radio stations which generate revenue from advertising. All branches of the military run clubs, golf courses, and hotels on state-owned land, often admitting civilians for higher fees than military personnel. This commercialization of military assets creates a massive off-the-books revenue stream that is not subject to public accountability. The system grants the military immense privilege, utilizing state land, personnel, and resources for commercial gain. This has led to public outcries over a lack of transparency and corruption, particularly after a 2020 mass shooting by a soldier was linked to a dispute over a military housing deal. Despite calls for reform, the Thai military's business empire remains deeply entrenched, highlighting the conflict between its role as a national defender and a powerful corporate entity. Case study 3, Pakistan, from welfare fund to corporate giant. Pakistan's military, with an official budget of around $7.6 billion for fiscal year 2024 to 2025, has a business empire often called Milbus, with different roots. It was born from a colonial-era welfare fund for veterans and has since blossomed into one of the country's most powerful conglomerates. The story starts with a fund the British set up for World War II veterans. After the 1947 partition, Pakistan's share of this money was used in 1954 to establish the Fauji Foundation, a charitable trust to provide welfare for ex-servicemen. Its first investments, a textile mill and a sugar mill. From that humble start, the Fauji Foundation has become a corporate titan. Today, the Fauji Foundation is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise with interests in nearly every major sector of Pakistan's economy. It's a leading player in fertilizer production, power generation, cement, and food processing. It also holds a major stake in Askari Bank, and the Fauji Foundation is just one piece of the puzzle. The military also runs businesses through the Army Welfare Trust, AWT, which has a huge portfolio in real estate and insurance. The Air Force has its Shaheen Foundation, and the Navy has the Bahria Foundation. Together, these organizations control over 50 businesses. Just like in Egypt, this military business complex enjoys huge advantages. These foundations often get tax exemptions, special access to state land at subsidized prices, and protection from market competition. Government contracts for things like logistics and construction are frequently awarded to military-controlled entities. This has created a powerful, self-perpetuating elite of retired and serving officers who move seamlessly between military command and corporate boardrooms. The military's financial independence means it's less accountable to the elected government, since a huge chunk of its financial activity happens outside the official defense budget. For Pakistan's economy, the dominance of these military-run businesses distorts the market, making it hard for private entrepreneurs to compete. The foundations argue their profits are funneled into a massive network of hospitals and schools for military families, but critics say this just creates a privileged society separate from the rest of the population. Case Study 4, Egypt, the Pharaoh's Boardroom. With an official 2024 budget of about $9.4 billion, Egypt is next. Here, the armed forces are not just the country's defenders, they are arguably its largest economic actor. The scale of this empire is staggering, though it's deliberately kept secret. Estimates on how much of the economy the military controls vary wildly, but its presence is everywhere. This all started back in the 1950s under Gamal Abdel Nasser, but the modern military empire really took shape in the 1980s. As Egypt began to liberalize its economy, the military was allowed to convert parts of its defense industry to produce civilian goods. This was formalized through several bodies, most importantly, the National Service Projects Organization, NSPO. On its website, the NSPO says its goal is to achieve self-sufficiency for the armed forces and offer surplus goods to locals at affordable prices. In reality, it has become a behemoth. Drive through Egypt and you can fill up your car at a military-owned Watania gas station. The highways you're on were likely built by the military's construction company. In the supermarket, you can buy Safi bottled water or pasta from the Queen Company. Both are produced by military-owned factories. They make everything from flat-screen TVs and cement to olive oil and fish. The military owns and operates hotels, sea resorts, and social clubs. This empire is built on a foundation of incredible privilege. Military-owned companies are often exempt from taxes and get first dibs on state contracts, frequently without any competitive bidding. But their biggest advantage might be access to cheap labor, conscripted soldiers who are paid a tiny fraction of the average wage to work in these factories and on these construction sites. This tilts the economic playing field so much that private companies just can't compete. Politically, the military's economic power guarantees its dominant role in the state. It's not just another government branch, it's a deeply entrenched interest group that is immune to public audits or parliamentary scrutiny. The profits flow right back into the military's own accounts, not the state treasury, funding a system of welfare that keeps its officers loyal. In recent years, there has been talk of listing some military-owned companies on the stock exchange, a move publicly supported by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Critics, however, are skeptical, seeing it as a way to legitimize the military's economic role without actually changing the power structure. Case Study 5, Iran, The Revolutionary Guard's sanctions-proof empire. With an official defense budget of around $10.3 billion, Iran sits at the top of our list. However, its true economic power lies with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which operates a shadow empire. The IRGC is more than just a military. It's an ideological force, a political powerhouse, and an economic juggernaut that thrives in the murky worlds of sanctions, black markets, and no-bid contracts. Its economic power is a direct extension of its mission to protect the Islamic Republic from both enemies abroad and dissent at home. The IRGC's economic journey began after the Iran-Iraq War, when it was tasked with post-war reconstruction. This led to the creation of its engineering arm, Khatam al-Anbiya, which has since become one of Iran's largest contractors, dominating sectors like oil and gas, infrastructure, and telecommunications. It builds dams, roads, and metro lines, often through massive government contracts worth billions. But the IRGC's economic power truly exploded in the 2000s. A wave of privatization, which was supposed to transfer state assets to the public, instead saw profitable government companies handed over to the IRGC and other loyalist institutions. At the same time, intensifying international sanctions created the perfect environment for its informal empire to flourish. Sanctions, designed to punish the Iranian regime, had the paradoxical effect of enriching the IRGC. As international companies left, IRGC-linked firms filled the vacuum. Their control over Iran's ports, airports, and borders gave them a monopoly on smuggling everything from consumer goods to illicit oil, generating billions in untaxed revenue. While the official economy suffered, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps profited from the crisis. This dual structure, one foot in the legitimate economy and deep roots in the shadow economy, makes the IRGC incredibly resilient. Its activities are notoriously opaque, but some estimates suggest it controls as much as a third of Iran's economy. It runs banks, telecommunication companies, and clinics, and has a decisive say in the country's lucrative oil and gas industry. In 2017, even Iran's then-president, Hassan Rouhani, complained, describing the IRGC as a government with guns that had distorted the economy. The consequences are stark. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps economic dominance ensures its political supremacy. It's not just loyal to the regime, it is the regime's economic and security backbone. Its independent wealth funds its military operations across the Middle East and its missile program, all without relying on the official state budget. This gives it a vested interest in maintaining a confrontational posture with the West, since a return to normal economic relations would threaten its monopoly on illicit trade. Latin America's creeping militarization. The trend of military involvement in the economy isn't confined to Asia and the Middle East. It's a global phenomenon, but across Latin America, a different and perhaps more insidious model is emerging. Here, the slide into military enterprise isn't always born from post-war reconstruction or a quest for institutional wealth. Instead, it's often a creeping side effect of domestic security crises and the long, haunting shadow of past military rule. It's a story told not in corporate balance sheets, but in the slow, steady expansion of military power into the everyday lives of citizens. Picture this. You fly to Mexico for a dream vacation. You land at the sleek, brand-new Tulum International Airport, eager to see the ancient ruins. You hop on the Mayan train, a massive railway project designed to connect the region's tourist hotspots. Your entire journey, from tarmac to temple, is seamless. It's also managed, operated, and owned by the Mexican military. This isn't a hypothetical, it's the reality forged under President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. What began in 2006 as a declared war on drugs has morphed into a sweeping militarization of the civilian economy. The armed forces aren't just fighting cartels anymore, they're running the country's most significant infrastructure. They've been handed control of seaports and customs offices, turning them into gatekeepers of the nation's trade. They even operate a commercial airline. For a tourist, it might seem efficient, but for Mexico, the consequences are profound. Every time the military is given a civilian job, a civilian institution is hollowed out, its expertise and oversight withering away. The lines of accountability blur into non-existence. Concerns about transparency and human rights, long a dark cloud over the military's drug war operations, now extend to their business dealings. The promise was to bring security. The result is a state where the military's power grows with every tourist ticket sold and every cargo container it inspects. In Brazil, the story is one of memory and a dangerous nostalgia. The country still lives with the ghost of its military dictatorship, a brutal regime that lasted from 1964 to 1985. While it was an era of repression, it was also an era of immense state-led development. The military built things, grand, ambitious projects like the Trans-Amazonian Highway, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the jungle, became symbols of a certain kind of progress, of order imposed on chaos. For decades after democracy returned, that legacy was a source of national trauma, but memories fade and narratives can be twisted. Under former President Jair Bolsonaro, a former army captain himself, that nostalgia was reignited and weaponized. He openly praised the dictatorship, framing it not as a period of lost freedoms, but as a golden age of security and growth that Brazil had lost. Suddenly, military figures were not just soldiers. They were seen by some as the only ones capable of getting things done. Generals were appointed to run major ministries, and the armed forces were once again presented as a tool for national development, not just defense. This isn't a story of a military building a secret off-the-books empire. It's a story of a nation being convinced to hand the keys to the kingdom back to the very institution it once fought to subordinate. It's a political project where the promise of newly paved roads is used to blur the lines between civilian and military rule, inviting the ghosts of the past back into the halls of power. Across the border, Argentina offers a powerful and cautionary counter-narrative. When the military junta fell in 1983, after the horrors of the Dirty War, the nation took a collective vow: never again. There was a visceral public reaction against the institution that had overseen kidnappings, torture, and economic collapse. What followed was one of the world's most deliberate and sustained efforts to demilitarize a society. The military was, for all intents and purposes, sent back to the barracks. Its budget was slashed, its political influence systematically dismantled, and its role in public life was aggressively curtailed. It was a national project of building a firewall between the armed forces and the state. For a generation, that firewall held. The military was subordinate to civilian control in a way that was almost unthinkable in its recent past. But firewalls require constant maintenance. In recent years, under the pressure of new crises, small cracks have begun to appear. Faced with rising drug trafficking, the government has begun tasking the armed forces with new internal security roles. It's a slow reversal, a pragmatic solution to a pressing problem. But for a nation with Argentina's history, it's a chilling development. Each new domestic mission is a test of the nation's resolve. It shows just how easily the lines, drawn with such pain and purpose, can begin to blur once more when the siren song of security calls. Or Turkey taming the generals. For much of its modern history, Turkey presented a different model, not a military building, a business empire, but a military acting as the ultimate guardian of the state itself. The Turkish Armed Forces, or TSK, long saw themselves as the protectors of the country's secular Kemalist principles, and they didn't hesitate to intervene in politics, launching coups in 1960, 1971, 1980, and a postmodern coup in 1997. Their economic influence, while significant, was more indirect. The centerpiece of this influence is OYAK, the Armed Forces Pension Fund, established in 1961. Legally a private entity, OYAK is one of Turkey's largest conglomerates, a sprawling holding company with major investments in steel, cement, automotive, energy, and finance. It co-owns the car manufacturer OYAK Renault and the steel giant Erdemir. This fund, built on the mandatory contributions of military personnel, gave the armed forces a powerful stake in the national economy and a source of wealth completely independent of the defense budget. However, the dawn of the 21st century marked a dramatic power shift. The rise of Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his AKP party began a systematic campaign to subordinate the military to civilian control. Using the EU accession process as leverage, Erdogan's government passed reforms that weakened the military's grip on political institutions like the National Security Council. The real turning point, however, was the failed coup attempt on July 15, 2016. In its aftermath, Erdogan unleashed a massive purge, dismissing thousands of officers and fundamentally restructuring the chain of command. The Gendarmerie and Coast Guard were moved under the Ministry of Interior, and the force commanders were subordinated to the Minister of Defense, placing the military firmly under presidential authority. While OYAK remains a formidable economic force, the TSK's ability to wield it for political influence has been broken. The Turkish story serves as a stark counterpoint to our other examples. It's a case study not of a military slowly becoming a corporation, but of a civilian government clawing back power from an institution that once held ultimate sway over both the state and a significant portion of its economy. The generals have been, for now, tamed. The examples of Iran, Egypt, Pakistan, and others aren't just isolated cases. They are the clearest illustrations of a global phenomenon where military institutions morph into powerful economic players. This pattern, where the line between national defense and corporate profit disappears, can be seen all over the world, and the consequences are consistently damaging. Historically, we've seen similar patterns. In Indonesia under Suharto, the military was deeply involved in business to secure its loyalty. China's People's Liberation Army also once ran a massive commercial empire, though the government forced it to divest from most of those businesses in the late 1990s, recognizing the corruption and distraction it was causing. Whether it's in Naypyidaw, Islamabad, or Cairo, the consequences of these military-run economies are remarkably consistent. First, they distort the free market and cripple private enterprise. Military businesses get unfair advantages like tax breaks, cheap land, and no-bid government contracts. Private businesses simply can't compete, which leads to monopolies and slower economic growth. The economy becomes less about innovation and more about who you know. Second, they entrench unaccountable power. When a military has its own source of revenue, it becomes less reliant on civilian government funding and therefore less subject to civilian control. Their budgets are secret, their profits are unaudited, and their operations are shielded from scrutiny under the guise of national security. This creates a state within a state. Third, this system breeds corruption. The immense wealth these empires generate is often used to enrich a small elite of senior officers, creating a powerful class with a vested interest in keeping things exactly as they are. Ultimately, the rise of the military as a corporate powerhouse is a fundamental failure of governance. It turns an institution meant to protect the nation into one that exploits it for profit. It weakens democracy, stifles the economy, and creates power structures that are incredibly resistant to reform. These aren't just armies. They're corporate boards with battalions, and their bottom line is often at odds with the well-being of the nations they're supposed to serve. The systems that control our world are often hidden in plain sight, veiled in corporate jargon and patriotic language. Understanding these military economic empires is key to understanding how power really works. If you want to keep exploring the hidden forces that shape our world, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell for more deep dives, just like this one. Your support helps us uncover the stories that truly matter. We started with a simple question: who has the world's richest militaries? The answer, as we've seen, has nothing to do with the official defense budgets you see in headlines. The true measure of wealth, and therefore power, for some of the world's most formidable armies isn't found in government ledgers. It's hidden in the revenue streams of cement factories, the balance sheets of banks, and the property deeds for vast tracts of land. The military economic empires of Myanmar, Thailand, Pakistan, Egypt, Iran, and others represent a profound shift in the nature of power. These militaries have moved beyond being just instruments of national defense to become dominant players in their national economies. This transformation, driven by a desire for autonomy, the needs of post-war reconstruction, or the opportunities of sanctions, has created a dangerous fusion of military might and corporate interest. The result is a system that erodes the very foundations of a healthy state. It stifles competition, fosters corruption, and makes civilian oversight almost meaningless. These armies aren't just serving a government, they've become a government unto themselves, with their own financial lifelines and a vested interest in a status quo that benefits them above all else. So the next time you hear about a country's military power, remember to look beyond the tanks and jets. Ask who owns the gas stations, who builds the roads, and who controls the flow of goods. Because in the 21st century, for some of the world's most powerful armed forces, the real battle isn't on the field, it's for market share. And their balance sheets are a far greater source of power than their arsenals.